This is the podcast for Narrate Church. Narrate Church meets every Sunday at 9 and 11 a.m. at the Grand Street Theater in Helena, Montana. For more information, visit www.narratechurch.org.
Wow. Did the terrible buzz go away over here? Is it gone? Okay, good. Did anybody else notice that and not hear the news? Hey, we're ADD. Welcome to Narrate. If you're a guest of this, welcome. We're thrilled that you're here. We're a church that gathers and scatters, and this is what we mean by gather. We value Sunday morning, that we value the weekly gathering for what it can accomplish in us. Personally, in our relationships, hopefully connect us, and what it can accomplish in us as a community, trying to tell God's story by the way we live that out together and individually, if you know what I mean. And then we value scattering for what it can accomplish in those other 6 days. We recognize that following Jesus involves lots of stuff that we need to learn, but really following Jesus involves a way of living, a way of trusting God in the everyday, a way of serving others. And so we try to shine a big old fat spotlight on the other 6 days and really strategically limit what we do in terms of programming on those other 6 days, because we feel like the greatest opportunity both to live out what we're trying to believe and to tell God's story to the people in our community are found in those other 6 days in the organic stuff, where you work and where you play and, the people that you live near and by and with. And so our values around here is let's gather on Sunday and then let's get the heck out of here and spend the other 6 days telling God's story by the way we live and hopefully serve others. And then periodically we like to scatter together, which is really where this whole Thursday night skiing thing comes in. This was born a couple years ago, really, when a family gifted us by saying, hey, we rented the mountain for us, now let's use it. And it's been neat to watch that evolve over the last few years to where last year we had in excess of 300 people, many of whom were students. And really the design of the Thursday night deal is to give you the chance to invite a friend or a coworker to come skiing so that at about 8 o'clock we can shut down the lifts and preach. Not really. What we do is, while you and your friends are skiing, we've got a holy tribe of people who sneak around and they put tracks under windshield wipers, because we all love that. I'm kidding, of course. There's no bait and switch of the event. It's really just an opportunity for you to serve your friends, and if that sparks spiritual conversation, then fantastic. And yet we're just going to kind of trust how God uses that either way, because we feel like the church should matter, that it should bring tangible benefit to a community. And so we strive to do that, and night skiing is one of the ways. So please take those tickets with you and invite your friends or whatever you want to do with those. They just won't do us any good after Thursday night. And we're going to do food this week, or this year. We've introduced the idea of, I think what Sarah's worked out, her and her team have done a great job, because it's going to be a hot dog and a bag of chips and a soda for $2. It was going to be free, and then I was like, see, there's a problem with free. If it's free, my kids will take 6 and they won't eat any of them. So let's do $2, and so then we won't waste them. And so if you want to serve with us in that way, if you're not a skier but you'd love to be a part of the event, then there's certainly opportunity to do that. And one more thing, if you're a guest, or maybe you've been here for a month or 2 or 3 and you're starting to figure out that we're a bunch of people who stare at our shoes, rather introverted socially, then these scattering events are really a best way to connect. I really project myself onto all of you. I'm sorry about that. Many of you have mad social skill. It's just that I do not. Like the man walking across the back of the room right now. Few people have better social skill than Dan. So, if you want to connect, events like this are really how it happens. We work hard to say, hey, let's connect relationally by serving. And just so happen, it doesn't get much better by serving while you're sitting on a chairlift, right? So there's that. Also, if you're a guest, I got to warn you, we're in a series right now called It's About More. Here's the artwork, which, as you might suspect, is it's not a series about creation. Well, kind of, I guess. Wow, how was that for random and awesome all at the same time? That was not planned, but I might make it sound like it wasn't planned next service too. It's a series about sexuality, but only kind of. Really, it's a series that's suggesting that sexuality and our sexual choices are connected to all other facets of life as well. And I hope that becomes more clear this morning than probably last week. I did hear a hilarious story of a guy from Narrate who he did his first church date last weekend and hadn't checked his email in a while. So as he was sitting next to this wonderful woman, he had to turn and say, I had no idea what series we are starting this morning. All those people aren't here this week, but this morning's not going to be nearly as horrifying, I assure you. What I hope to accomplish this morning is probably something you already know, but that's part of the kingdom of God, right, is being reminded of things we already know and trying to live them out, and that is that we're going to talk about lust this morning. And I think the it's about more motif idea becomes more clear this morning because as I hope to demonstrate that lust isn't just a sexual issue. But first I got a couple of jokes. So there's these 4 guys. They go fishing on Saturday morning. They're all married guys and they're all thrilled. And by the way, all these guys have low views of their wife and marriage, neither of which do I have, but it's still a funny joke. So they're fishing and it's been about an hour. They're on the river and one guy says, man, you would not believe what I had to do to get out here and get to go fishing today. Really? He said, yeah, I had to promise my wife that I would paint our entire bedroom next weekend. Next guy's like, that is nothing. Oh yeah, what'd you have to do? He said, I had to promise my wife that I wouldn't do anything on Saturday until the deck is completely stained. It's gonna take me a month. Next guy's like, nothing. My wife and I thought we were just talking about remodeling the entire kitchen, but I had to promise her that I won't do anything else for the rest of my Saturdays until the kitchen is completely remodeled. And I got to build the cupboards. I got to build what do they call those things? They're not called cupboards anymore. You build them, cabinets. They noticed after a while the 4th guy hadn't said a word, and they're like, dude, what about you? What'd you have to do? He said, nothing. Set the alarm for 5:30. Alarm clock went off, rolled over, kissed my wife on the cheek, said fishing or sex. She said, wear sunscreen. I love it. Elderly couple was watching TV one night, and they're watching their favorite sitcom. It's a good one, isn't it? They're watching their favorite sitcom, and there's a commercial, and this episode's about sex. And so during the commercial, the wife turns to her husband and says, hey, whatever happened to our sexual relations? He kind of does one of these, and he's like, man, I just can't remember. For the life of me, I can't remember. I don't even think we got a Christmas card from him this year. Not quite as good, right? Okay, I'd like to pray, and we're going to jump in. Lord, lust is something that we know a lot about, and yet is profoundly difficult to rein in. And so would you give us wisdom and insight, not in purely intellectual ways, but in these profound, repentant kind of ways, that you'd help us see areas where we need to make changes and hopefully be inspired to follow you a little bit better. We love you. Amen. So, question. Is bigger better? Is bigger better? That's kind of funny, right? Like in a series like this, right? I just watched half of you elbow the person next to you like you're in youth group, like, really? You really can't say that. I'm like, is bigger better? It's kind of a sexual question, but it's kind of not, right? Does the person who struggles to have more influence and believes that they'll be happier when they do really struggle with something different than the person who's, say, checked into a rehab for sexual addiction? Does the person who really believes that they'll be happier if they look more like her struggle with something different than the person who really believes he'll be happier if he has a bigger house or a different car? Does struggling with, say, the need to have the latest, greatest technology emanate from the same brokenness as, I don't know, struggling to sleep with somebody different every weekend? I mean, do those come from the same place or different places? This lust thing, is it a sexual thing or is it a human brokenness thing? I mean, sure, sometimes lust leads us to addictions to, say, pornography. Sometimes it leads us to tally marks on the headboard, so to speak. Sometimes it leads to adultery. But doesn't it also lead to credit card debt and chronic discontent at work? I mean, are they the same thing or different things? In a room this size, some of you are lusting after a friend's spouse. Others, after a friend's influence. Same or different? Like is bigger better? Is more? Is the grass greener? Now, here's the problem. Like, if all we have to do is answer correctly on the test, then we all know the answer, right? Like no one needed to drag themselves out of bed this morning in 0-degree temperatures and sit here and absorb a lesson that says, hey, bigger's not better. Because y'all know that. I mean, if all we have to do is put the right question down, and if that's what gets us into heaven, we're all in. If that's what it means to be a Christian, then we're probably all Christian. If that's what it means to really be wise, then we're all wise. That's the struggle, right? Like lust is one of those things that we're constantly aware of. We could answer the questions correctly, and yet it doesn't change the danger of it, does it? I was just talking to somebody in the latter part of this last week who was sharing a story about a pastor, and it was one of those, like I had to look myself in the mirror, because basically what the story brought out was that this guy wasn't leading people for glory to God. This guy wasn't leading people to serve people. This guy was leading people to feed his own ego. It's lust, right? And it might be a little more dignified lust. It might not get us labeled. It might be a little more socially acceptable than, say, an addiction to pornography. But it's the same thing. And it's equally as gross and equally as devastating, is it not? So here's what I want to do is I just want to look in the text. There's a couple stories that I think capture the reality of this situation and in some ways capture just how horrifying it can be. It's at moments like these where I'm so grateful for the text. And I know that I'm supposed to say that because I'm a pastor, and you're like, yeah, of course you're grateful for the text because you're a pastor. But it's a moment like these where I just kind of compelled to say, if you're someone trying to follow Jesus, I can't encourage you enough to carve out time in your day to crack open the text. Because reading the Bible is not so much about learning new information. That's part of it. But reading the Bible is about God and his Spirit reminding us of things we already know and inspiring us to live them out. And I think that's the case with lust, because in the opening pages of the text, it's a lust story. In the opening pages, God is creating, and he's creating these remarkably beautiful trees, these trees that are captivating. They're amazing to look at. They're amazing to be around. They're amazing to smell and to touch. The fruit on these trees is absolutely awesome. And so he puts them in this garden, and he creates all this vegetation. They're beautiful. They please the senses. And we know this because in Genesis 1:31, the way the text says it, the way the ancient Hebrew people said it, was God saw that all that he had made, and it was very good. It's amazing. It's captivating. It's beautiful. And yet fast forward, you probably know the story, but and God takes people and he puts them in the middle of this garden. Why? Because it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's awesome. He wants them to experience it. But God knows something, and that is that it's not really good if there aren't options. That's the human experience, right? That God in his love knows that if he is the only option, then it can't be good. There's got to be opportunity to choose it. And so also in the middle of this garden is a tree with a really long name. And we've got aspen trees and pine trees and oak trees, and this is a tree called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's a long name. But what it represents is a way other than God's way. What it represents is bigger is better. Grass is greener. More is more. You've got this way, or there's that way. And the way the text describes the fruit is that when you eat the fruit, your eyes will be awakened to this other way. You'll begin to experience this alternative way. And so Eve does, as does Adam. Then the man and his wife, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. I think it's first important to recognize that she was captivated. They were captivated by their senses. It looked good. It smelled good. It tasted good. It's beautiful. That's the way God makes things, because God has this built-in appreciation for beauty. And yet Eve's story becomes our story, doesn't it? Because she becomes captivated. She becomes enamored with the fruit. Her story becomes our story. Their story becomes our story, because I just have to think that she went through the same thing you and I go through in these moments. She knows. If they win the game, she really won't be a happier forever. if she gets the job, if she gets the promotion, if he gets the new car, if he gets his bank account to this size, it won't really make him happier forever. But like that's the deal, right? I have to think that she knew in one sense the grass isn't greener, bigger is not better, and yet in another sense she must have thought maybe this time it is. Like maybe this time being married to her, not her, is better. It will make me happier. Maybe this time the promotion will actually it'll fully satisfy my appetite. Maybe this time this outside thing can bring happiness. And so she eats it. And I think it's important to recognize that what the fruit represents there is really by definition an alternative to what God is offering. Like what the fruit represents there is very much an alternative. Why? Because in those moments, they always appeal to our dissatisfaction. That's the issue. I'm not happy with this. This will make me happy. I'm not happy with what I have. This will make me happy. It's interesting to me that the text opens with the story of lust. There's a story of God saying, hey, I made you. You have a purpose. I have a plan. Join with me. Put your hands in the soil. Do something with my creation. And the first threat is, oh, wait a minute. Maybe there's better options. Eve captures the reality of lust in all of our lives. There's another story that I think speaks even more vividly. Now, I agree with Rob Bell when he says that if the Bible were made into a movie, I wouldn't want to watch it because it would be too graphic, too horrific, too much terror, too much brokenness. I mean, you would think that God would create a very family-friendly story, but if it were made into a movie, I mean, think of the genocide, of the incest, of cutting a person's body up into pieces and mailing those pieces to the outermost ends of the known world. And that's just the first few books. And there's one story that shows up that is particularly gross. In fact, it's almost embarrassing to the Christ follower. I think it's why we don't talk about it at church. But I do think it's there to challenge us when it comes to lust. The story is in 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel is actually a book that is written to capture the reign of King David, the great king of Israel, the one that Israel would forevermore look forward to, and Jesus was in many ways the fulfillment of. But in 2 Samuel 13, we catch up with one of David's sons. He's a guy named Amnon. And Amnon, as it comes to, you'll come to find out, is madly in love with his sister Tamar. He is boiling with lust for his sister Tamar, and that's just the first verse. Look at verse 2. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to have anything to do with her. So Amnon becomes enamored with, lusts after his sister, to the extent that the people around him, they begin to notice like something's wrong with this guy. He's kind of dejected. He looks poor. He's pale. Like, what's the deal? And one of his advisors comes to Amnon and goes, dude, what's your problem? Lose your job? Like, what happened? Did you hit your thumb with a hammer? Like, what's going on here? And he says, no, actually, turns out I am madly in love with my sister, but I can't figure out a way to actually get her. And so his advisor helps Amnon develop a plan. He says this to him: go to bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand. It's gross. And he executes the plan. He lays in his bed. His father complies. Tamar is sent to his room to prepare this meal. She gets into the room. He quickly makes clear to her that he's not sick, nor is he hungry, that what he wants is her in a very sexual way. She resists. She begs him not to hurt her. And he does it anyway. In fact, verse 12 says this. Is it verse 12? Verse 14. He says, but he refused to listen to her. And since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Now, we could talk for hours about the pain of these moments, right? We could talk for hours about the horror that happens when when strong people use their strength to subdue and take advantage of weaker people. We could talk for hours of the horrors that come with rape. We could talk about incest. We could talk about David's silence, which is equally as alarming in this situation. But what I want to look at is verse 15. Because it's kind of a punch in the gut, I think, on this whole lust thing. It says this, "Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he loved her." Very peculiar. Like, why in the world would the author be telling us this? And why does he think we care at this point what Amnon is feeling? Like, okay, so we've got some compassion for her. What's going on in her head? We'd love to know that. We're concerned for her, but we don't care about him. And then there's the, like, he's angry? Like, wait a minute. Like, her anger, that makes sense. But he's angry? Like, how did his feelings go from one extreme to another extreme? How was he in one moment, why was he so in love with her, quote unquote, and in the next moment, he hated her? What's going on there? What is it about that verse that kind of strikes us as not even being true? Like, how could he move from loving her to hating her quite like that? And the answer is lust, isn't it? Like, that's the way lust always works. It causes us to do alarming things. And things that the moment we get them, they're as unsatisfying as they were we had to have them. It's scary. It takes up massive amount of space in our skulls. It makes us do things that are horrifying. That's the story of lust, isn't it? It for me just reaffirms in some ways my appreciation for the text and my trust that it's from God, because like if you were making this stuff up, you would leave this story out. And yet it seems that what God is saying here is you want to talk about lust? Well, let's talk about Eve. Okay, that one's pretty easy. Now let's talk about Amnon. And before you start talking about how horrible of a person he was, let's look in the mirror a little. That's really the story, right? If Eve reminds us that lust is ever present and ever threatening, doesn't Amnon remind us of the damage that it can do? Of the things that it can cause us to suddenly do? And yet, maybe most importantly, doesn't it quickly remind us how lust makes a promise that it never delivers upon? That it can promise us things, whether it's happiness in the form of work or money or sex, it makes promises, but it never delivers upon those promises. Now here's where, at about Thursday of this week, I started looking in the classifieds for a new job. Because it's really easy to identify the problem, isn't it? And at this point you go, okay, so thank you very much. Lust is an issue. It's an issue for all of us. It can destroy us. It can destroy others. So, hello, like, what's the answer, right? Like, that's what we're here for. And I got to be honest with you, I don't have the like click your heels together 3 times, recite this verse, and tap your head twice with your left hand while you're eating a banana, and boom, it goes away. Don't have it. Don't have the like take this pill. None of those solutions. It's a very troubling thing, because what the text from cover to cover seems to say is, hey, lust, it's not going anywhere. Hey, this thing called lust, it can wreck your life. Hey, even some of the most remarkable people, they get taken out of this unhealthy desire to believe that bigger is better. There is, though, I think, one clue, and the clue, in my mind, comes from a very strange place, in the 10 Commandments. In the 10 Commandments, the first place they show up is in Exodus 20, and the 10th commandment is this: you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is the issue we're talking about, right? This issue of coveting. So in one sense, the fact that it makes the cut for the 10 Commandments kind of affirms that this is a human issue, right? Like that we all deal with this, that it's not going away anytime soon. God gives 10 commandments, 10 things, like here's what you better avoid. One of them is this idea of lust or coveting. It also confirms that lust it's about more. Because in one sense, he says, hey, don't covet your neighbor's wife. But in the next sense, his ox or his donkey, which I'm assuming isn't about a sexual desire, right? So lust isn't a sexual thing. It's a brokenness thing. You know what the rabbi said about this? And if you're someone that doesn't care what the rabbis say, then I don't have anything else good to say to you, because there's this midrash from the rabbis. This isn't in the text. This is like first century or just before first century would have been when it was captured. We don't know how old it would have been, but they said this. Well, first we got to read the Ten Commandments, because they observed this in the Ten Commandments. So I'm going to kind of power through them. You already know them. You haven't memorized. You haven't tattooed to your chest, but I'm going to read them anyway. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. There's one. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. There's two. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. There's three. Remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. There's four. Honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God has given you. 5. 6, 7, 8, and 9 are you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. 10 is the one we've already read. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. Here's what the rabbi said, is that you can measure somebody's obedience of the first 9. You could see it. Like if I murder somebody, you know it. Right? That was their sentiment. Now, I realize that Jesus kind of ups the ante there, but just come with me to this ancient rabbinic line of thought. They said you could tell if someone's honoring their parents. You could tell if they have false idols in their house. You can tell these things. But what they said was the 10th commandment, you can't measure it. You can't tell if somebody has a lust issue. You can't tell if someone has a coveting issue. Here's what they said. Sick of me saying that yet? What they said is when you obey the first 9, your reward is the 10th. What they said is when you obey the first 9 commandments, your reward will be you won't covet. Fascinating to me. Essentially what they're saying is when you honor God with your life, when you obey God, when you live the life God has for you, not the life he has for your neighbor, not the life that he had for your dad, not the life that he had for this person on TV, when you live the life God has for you, when you're faithful in the life God has given you, then you won't want the life other people have. That coveting will be less of an issue. Now, I know it's kind of a religious answer. It's kind of a simplistic answer. And in fact, I was even thinking to myself this morning, it's an answer that involves contentment that's very Christ-centered. And so for those of you that are wrestling through life with us and aren't yet Christ-centered, I'm not trying to shame you. It's just as far as I could get in my own understanding of this issue. What it's saying is, hey, as my friend Fred says, God is in the business of raising the bar on what it takes for you to have fun. What he means by that is the more you obey, the more you live the life God has for you, the more what satisfies you will change. If you're here, I hope you're here because there's somebody in your life that you tremendously respect. And in fact, you kind of watch them live their Christian life and you go, I don't understand how you do it. I don't understand. I could never be married to one woman for the rest of my life. I don't know how you do it. I could never be that generous with my stuff. I don't know how you do it. I could never treat somebody who mistreats me that way. Hopefully we all have those examples. The reality is, it's not as hard for them as it looks. Because as they honor God and obey him, their desires change. You're trying to imagine following Jesus with your desires. What the rabbis recognize is your desires change when you set a certain course in your life. Now, I would argue that you see this in your life in maybe a more simplistic form. I was thinking about this week. Like, when I go to lunch, I'm old enough now that there's what I want to eat and what I should eat, right? There's what I like, the burger and the fries. What everything tells me is that'll make me happy. But what I know is it'll make me want to crawl under my desk at 2 p.m. and take a nap, right? What'll actually make me happy is the sandwich and the salad. Does this make any sense? So there's this, like, bigger is better, But what I know intellectually is, no, it's not, because if I eat the burger and the fries, then by 4 o'clock, I hate my job and I hate my life and I just want to go home and sleep. And if I eat the salad and the sandwich, then at 4 o'clock, I'm like, come on, bring it on. This is a blast. I just want to keep doing this. Does that make any sense? I think it's the same thing. Or you, like me, have certain things in any given day that you're supposed to do. And have you noticed that the things you're supposed to do are never the things you want to do? Paul talks about this. And it's totally trivial. Like, if what you're supposed to do is make phone calls, then what you're convinced will make you happy is returning emails. But if what you're supposed to do is return emails, then what you're convinced will make you happy is making phone calls. It's horrible, right? It's this human thing called lust, I believe. For me, I block my day from 9 to noon to just work on the weekend. Like, I'm not supposed to return emails. I'm not supposed to look at ESPN.com. Won't be looking at any Broncos information for a few months. I'm not supposed to do any of that stuff. Like, from 9 to noon, it's just supposed to be like practice and pray and study and read and contemplate whether or not I should jump out the window because I don't have anything good to say. I mean, there's all these different things like, I'm just supposed to work on the weekend. What I've noticed is when I just do what I'm supposed to do, when I'm supposed to do it, then I'm energized through the whole day. But when I bounce around, like by 4 o'clock, I'm like, ugh, and I'm bored and I'm disengaged, and I get home and I'm like, I didn't get anything done, and ugh. Does this make any sense? Relationally, we see it in relationships. You'll come across, especially in marriage, an encounter where there's what you want to do and what you know Christ would do, which is not necessarily what you want to do, it's what your spouse would want to do, right? And 2 hours later, if you get your way, you're miserable. And if you serve the person you're with, you're fulfilled. Like, that's what the rabbis are talking about. You want to deal with the lust in your life? Well, then be faithful. And those hooks, the ever-present pull of, I can't be happy, I can't be content, it goes away. Dallas Willard, he says it this way, this interview that I heard with him years ago, and I've referenced this before, but I find it so fascinating. They asked Dallas Willard, who is none other than one of the greatest theologians alive today, and this man who works in academia, he's one of the most respected professors of philosophy in the world, but a Christ follower. He was asked one time by someone who asked him, how do I grow in my faith? His answer, just do the next right thing God is calling you to do. Just do the next right thing. Now, his point is, first of all, that if you try to do that, you'll find that to be remarkably difficult, and therefore you'll turn to the spiritual disciplines, and you'll turn to other Christ followers, and you'll turn to Jesus. But what he's saying is, you want to be faithful? You want to live the life God has for you, not the one you think you should have. You want to live the one that God's calling you to, not the one you think will make you happy. Just do the next thing God's calling you to do. Listen, if you're someone here and you're exploring Jesus maybe for the first time, it would be really important to us that you would understand that what the Bible teaches from cover to cover is that we can't earn God's love, that the only way to explain his love is through him, not through our merit. That's clear in Genesis 1, and it's clear in Revelation 21. Like, the story is God's love is insane. And there's no way to explain why he loves us other than the fact that he's so darn loving. That's what Jesus captures on the cross. Like, I love you so much that I'll do this even though you don't deserve it. And so following Jesus is every bit about grace. But as we like to say around here, grace is opposed to earning, not to effort. And I think on this issue of lust, that becomes very clear. That if we want the life God has for us, yes, his love is there and available, but we got work to do. Not to earn it, but to realize it. You could be the most athletic person on the planet, but if you're not willing to do your work, that's not going to really translate to anything in your life. That's the idea. The scriptures would indicate that bigger's not better. And the way we deal with that is about alarms and police cars and distracting things like that. Let me pray.
For more information on Narrate Church, visit www.narratechurch.org or download the mobile app, now available for iPhone and Android.